Hello and welcome to my second recap video on proportionality. This is again covering something that hopefully you've seen before in the home study, but just a chance to go back over it and just see a couple more examples, help you remember how to do it. And there will be a chance to do a couple of questions. So before we get going again, I would suggest you make sure you have paper and pen or pencil and then a calculator as well to help you out when you're having a go at the questions yourself. Okay then guys, so now on to one of the really key skills of this topic, which is starting to be able to create formulas using facts about direct or inverse proportion. It starts simple and it's a very kind of formulaic staged process that you need to get used to following, but you need to be able to do it for these ones because it gets onto much more complicated ones by the time we're onto the grade 9 stuff that you will not be able to do any other way. So I'm going to go through two examples. This is how they will phrase it for you in the GCSE exam, and then I'm going to give you a few to have a look at yourself. Okay, but the more practice of this you get, the more confident you're going to be with the grade 9 stuff later on. So we're told x is directly proportional to y, and that when x is 6, y is 10. We're going to first of all create a formula, which you might be explicitly asked to do in an exam, or they might ask you to do a question that requires you to get the formula first. Okay, so we're going to start by getting the formula. So step 1 is write a proportionality statement. And we're going to use that symbol that we saw at the beginning of this video. If x is directly proportional to y, I can write x is directly proportional to y in notation. Sorry, it's not a very well drawn proportionality symbol there. If x is directly proportional to y, then that means x is equal to some number times y. We tend to use k to represent our constant of proportionality. Don't ask me why we do that, but we use k. So step number 1, proportionality statement. Step number 2, write equals to k times the letter. Then we're going to use the combination of values that we were told about to substitute in and find out what k is. So I'm going to put 6 in for x, and I'm going to put 10 in for y, so 10k. Solve for k. So 6 over 10 is k, and I'm going to write that either as 0.6 or as a simplified fraction, 3/5. Either is absolutely fine. The final step is giving our answer. Now, if we were asked for the formula, you need to make sure you've given the final formula, which uses that value we've just found. And we said here that x was equal to k times y, so we can either write x equals 0.6y, or we can write x equals 3y over 5 using the 3/5. Either is fine and will get you full marks in the exam. It's just about whether you personally prefer decimals or fractions. I would encourage you to try and get comfortable with fractions just in case it comes up in a non-calculator exam, because sometimes fractions are the best way to work with them then. Okay, here's another example. You'll notice I've used slightly different wording. I've said varies directly. It means exactly the same thing and you deal with it exactly the same way. So step 1, proportionality statement. S is directly proportional to t. Therefore, S is equal to k times t. So that's step 2 done. Next step, I'm going to substitute in the pair of values I've been given and solve for k. So 2 is equal to k times 5, or 5k. I'm going to divide both sides by 5 to get 2/5 as my k value, or 0.4 if you prefer it as a decimal. Final step, I'm going to write out the formula. So I've got S equals k times t. I now know what k is, so I can either write S equals 0.4t, or I can write that S is equal to 2t over 5. So either using the fraction or using the decimal form, as you prefer. Either would get you the full marks. Okay, so your turn, guys. Here are 2 examples of GCSE style direct proportion questions. You need to come up with a formula for each one. Do what you can, and in a couple of minutes, I will talk you through the answers. Okay then, so here are the answers. I would encourage you to make sure you take notes on the full method if you didn't get the full method down as you did it. You do want to get into the habit before you get into the GCSE exam of writing the method down as I'm going to show you here, because that's what's going to guarantee you full marks and also allow you to access the higher level questions later on in the topic. So for the orange question, A is directly proportional to C, so the first thing we're going to write down is our proportionality statement using that symbol. That means we can then write that A is equal to some value K times C. Our next step is going to be substituting in the 8 and the 14, and then solving to find out that K is 8/14. We've got a fraction there. Because it's dividing by a multiple of 7, you're not going to get a very nice decimal. So I would probably just simplify it to 4/7, okay, because your decimal is going to be quite a long string of recurring values. So you can therefore write that A is 4/7 of C, or A equals 4C over 7. Just in case anybody set up at the very beginning their A and C the other way round, which you can do, it will still work, but you will end up with this sum instead. It's also correct, and provided that your working out is consistent for that alternative method, you will get full marks for that in an exam. So here's the second purple question. Well done if you managed to get to the end of that one. We're going to start by saying that D is proportional to F. Therefore, D is equal to some value K times F. Put in the two values that we were given as a pair. Solve to find out what K is. And you can also give this as a decimal if you prefer. It depends which one you're more comfortable with doing. So therefore, you can have either of those two as your final answer as a formula. Do make sure you write down this as the last line. A lot of people stop at this point because they feel like they found something. And while you have found something useful, unless you write down this final line, you haven't answered the question. So you are guaranteed to lose at least 1 mark if you don't do that final step. The alternative to writing the formula with D as the subject is to write it this way around as well. And again, you might have reached that as a conclusion if you use D and F the other way around at the beginning, which is completely correct. As long as you are internally consistent, you will be fine and get full marks for that one as well. This is an AQA GCSE exam style question on the topic of direct proportion. Have a look at it with the person next to you and discuss what you think you would write in an exam in order to get all 3 of the marks. Try and jot them down if you can. Roughly every 30 seconds, I'm going to pop a hint on the board as well. And then once you've had about 2.5 to 3 minutes, I'll put the mark scheme up for you to have a look at as well. Okay, well done, guys. Here is the mark scheme. Discuss with your partner how many marks you think you would have got based on the working out that you recorded.